Hey, Buddy Manning here. Welcome to Dome Theory. As promised, Jared Weiss is in the building. Third, fourth appearance here on the show. We love to have him. It's always a fun time, man. Just a week ago, I was heading to Washington for the Celtics Wizards game, road trip. I'm on the Delta flight. I look to my right, and there's Jared with the beaming sunglasses, reflective sunglasses, hair flowing, just looking like a superstar. And here he is on Dome Theory. Great to have you, Jared.
Yeah, that was me with about 3 hours of sleep. That's why I had the shades on, because the light hurt, because I didn't have any time to sleep the night before.
Well, we had our own rose. That was awesome. It's not often you get that.
Yeah, because I was just on a flight the other night. I think it was from Miami, and I was stuck in the middle seat eventually. And thankfully, they actually moved me to the emergency row. I got lucky. I just asked, but that flight was insane. It's a lot. Most of the time nowadays, I feel like when I'm on a flight, it's either completely empty and I have the back of the plane to myself, or I'm stuck in a middle seat with like three people losing their minds around me.
Yeah, or as it was last night, getting transferred to the bus, heading back from the Garden after Celtics Heat, packed in there, and some guys like, "Mr. T, it's a pandemic," but that's how it is. We're still gonna pack in everywhere, even in the middle of the pandemic. Jared, let's talk some Celtics because there are a million topics here to go through. You wrote a great piece earlier this month about some of the rumblings heading into the deadline. And I just want to go through pretty much all of it. And I think Marcus Smart's a good place to start because listen, we've been covering the Celtics for a while now, and the last 8 years, it's just been one big Marcus Smart debate. That's pretty much been the experience around this team here. And now he's on the upward trajectory of it again, averaging about 7 assists per game over the last 5 here, plus 118. And when he's been in the games, they've looked more organized. They've been absolutely dominant defensively. And ever since he returned from injury, there's been this turnaround with the team that extends before injury, has something to do with the schedule, of course, here. It's lightening up a little bit. But Smart's looked about as good as he ever has in a Celtics uniform since he's gotten back from COVID and the thigh injury here. And it's interesting that there's been those rumblings. You and Zach Lowe and many others have talked about Smart being out there. One of the players that's potentially available for other teams if the right deal is there. So I don't know how much this recent streak changes that or how you're looking at it, but Marcus Smart, I think, is the guy everybody's looking at heading into this deadline.
Yeah, I don't think it's that different than it's been in the past. For Smart's always been available because he's always been good enough for other teams to think that he's the missing piece for them to be real contenders. And then it's always been is he good enough for the Celtics to be a contender with him as one of their core guys? And he's one of the hardest guys to evaluate the entire game because he's such an intangibles guy. And he's so great at everything you can't quantify. I mean, he is spectacular at everything you can't quantify. He is an incredible leader. And, I've reported stuff about the way his leadership has been reacted to in the locker room and things like that. But, like, at the end of the day, he's an incredible leader. He really is. And I feel for him that I think when he was earlier in his career, where they had a more established veteran team, I think his leadership was a lot more effective because that team could really ride the wave of what he brought to the table, while it just hasn't really been the case. And then there's also I think this is the confusing part, is that I've heard about this from a lot of people I've talked to around the league and the team, that there is a illness and that there's just the whole thing of when a voice has been around too long, eventually it gets tuned out a little bit. That was something that Brad Stevens admitted, something that myself and other people had reported on plenty over the last year or two about how that was kind of happening with Brad. And it's like, Brad, I think we're seeing it. Brad was one of the best coaches in the league. I think people kind of lost sight of that for a while, but he still admitted that that was an issue that he ran into, and it was part of why he made the move that he made. And I feel like that's happening with Smart, and it's not really fair to Smart because I feel like Smart kind of does just about everything you would want him to do to be the best player he can be. And there are just some things that he does that are that stick out as things that are out of control. And that kind of has a big effect, even if it's a little bit of a blowing up or inflating the importance of something that maybe isn't as impactful in a vacuum as you think it is, but it just feels that way because of the emotional narrative around him. But at the end of the day, like, he's the team's best playmaker. We've known that for a while. I think a lot of us were expecting Al Horford to step in and kind of go back to being the playmaker he was before, but they just haven't really utilized him in that way consistently. I think we've seen a little bit more of it over the last month or so, but it just isn't, they haven't really built the system through him as much as I thought they would. And I wonder if that's something that can change. We might not really find out, because I wouldn't be shocked if both of those guys or one of those guys gets moved in the next few weeks. But,
I want to get
it's
to the Horford thing later, but
sure,
let's
go.
stick on Smart for now.
There's just so much to go through there. So
Yeah,
cut me off. Yeah.
it's been interesting with Smart this year because you do kind of see that staleness. Like that reaction from the team after he called out the Jays essentially after the Chicago meltdown early in the year was so interesting because listen, Ime's criticized them too. I think there's been a movement toward accountability for everybody in the locker room this year under him. But when Smart said what he said after that game, the reaction over the next week or two there was, yeah, we might have had a point, but it wasn't great that got out there. I think Brad expressed that, Ime, as well as the Jays. So that was weird. And then even this recent interview with Jay and the article that he did earlier this week that was outstanding too. I think that reflected the Smart experience this year, that he's tried to rein it in, be more conservative in his approach, fit a role that Ime wants him to be contained in. But there's still that sense. You see the quote that he says there that he could do more. He could be a solution in these fourth quarters. He could be that playmaking point guard and the offensive general for this team. And I'm conflicted because there are fans who legitimately feel he could be the every play point guard day in and day out for this group if he was just given the opportunity. But it doesn't feel like Ime or the group as a whole want to put him in that position. It was funny that Jay did that interview before the Atlanta game because in that Atlanta game, he was outstanding as the point guard for 3 quarters. Then the fourth quarter, the ball got away from him. And, it was pretty much the story of what he said in that interview. So you do kind of see the group not fully buying into him from my perspective.
Yeah. So, I think I was one of several people writing this coming into the season. I think Ime talked about it too in his early pressers before the year started, that they were reshaping this roster to have Smart run pick and roll. And it was a really interesting bet because, he's done plenty of it. Statistically,
And he's good at it.
He's
Yeah.
always rated out as one of the top pick and roll playmakers in the league. Like the synergy numbers for his points per possession as a pick and roll passer and scorer were always phenomenal. The guy, I don't know about his commanding an entire game, but as far as just getting over the screen, getting into the mid-range area and making reads, he is very good at it. I wouldn't say he's great at it, he's very good at it. And he is good at reading defensive schemes and making adjustments. And I know that the last trip that I was on to Florida, where they played Orlando, Miami, and Dallas, that was like one of the first times I got to sit courtside for a game and covering an NBA game, because so few places in the country have that still. And the thing that blew me away was getting to actually hear his communication, his conversations with Ime. And the dude is really another coach on the floor. And on both ends of the floor, he is making so many adjustments. He's talking them over. He's calling out things for everybody. It really gave me something that I kind of already knew, but getting to see it up close gave me a deeper appreciation for his intrinsic value. And so when you don't put the ball in the hands of the guy that's making all those reads and communicating all those reads, you are losing the flexibility of your offense. We've just seen this offense lose a lot of its adaptability and it being behind the 8 ball a lot of the times and making adjustments to counter the adjustments that the defense is making. But at the end of the day, it really seems like this team's only real problem offensively has just been figuring out how to close out games. I feel like that Portland game where they didn't hit a shot in the last 7 minutes was kind of the quintessential game to epitomize this season. And
not only that, the last play where it felt like they wanted to do something that didn't happen. And I don't know if it wasn't clear if Tatum just kind of took that shot and didn't run the play the way it was supposed to be, or if there was an option for him to shoot. But it was weird because Brown was wide open.
I think the thing at the end of this team was built before the season to have playmakers across the board in a way to kind of bring back the bubble team that had Hayward, Smart, Brown, Tatum out there, where they had lots of playmakers across the floor, and they were able to kind of drive and kick or swing around. And every single time the ball would hit the second side, the guy that was attacking was a good playmaker that can make those reads. And this team was built to be the same way. and they just haven't really run that kind of stuff consistently. They've been too much of a spread, high middle pick and roll team, or ice. The funny thing is with this team, because of Tatum and Brown, pick and roll a lot of the time is really isolation, because you run a pick and roll just to get the switch and then bounce
Yeah.
back out into isolation.
And I think they're still
And
second in isolation rate, which is crazy.
yeah,
Because they're not very good at it.
I think a lot of people that just kind of read the numbers, mostly kind of national people, will say Jason Tatum is terrible in isolation. He's terrible in isolation because the team is too predictable with their isolation. Like he's one of the best isolation scorers in the league, I think.
That's fair.
The dude can get the shots off. And this year, he's really made a lot of progress in turning those isolations into playmaking opportunities. The problem is the team has just been too predictable at it. So he's getting so many isolation possessions where the team knows where who he's targeting, where he's going to work from, when they can load up their help and recover and stuff like that. So, I think it's fine that the team wants to keep leaning into it. I just think they have to put the ball in Smart's hands to start the play most of the time, so that when they do get them into isolation, they can't just set it up from the beginning. And we have seen some progress on that, but the schedule's been really easy lately. They just killed Miami. Miami was missing their two guards. It's like, it's not these wins.
And they've blown games against some really bad teams. The Clippers undermanned the Timberwolves. Even the Blazers. I know they're playing better lately, but that was not a good game to lose.
No, the Blazers loss was insane. Like, that was absolutely insane.
Horrible. And they've done this numerous times this year. And that's why I look at when people view the season, and it's kind of a mixed reaction because they've been better lately. You say, oh, they have a great net rating. They've been awesome quarters 1 through 3. It's just, they've blown a few games here or there. They have blown more games in these fourth quarters than I could just ever imagine a team doing. And they've done it so consistently that it's hard to just kind of overlook that as a fluke. So that still is their fatal flaw that they really haven't gotten over. I know they had that nice win over Indiana at home. Brown was pretty good in the fourth quarter in that game playmaking. But it's just a blip on the radar. They have to get much better. And Atlanta was another situation where they were just horrible in the fourth quarter. So to wrap up the Smart thing, here's my view on it. I wonder how you look at his candidacy for a trade going into the future. I'd love to package him up into a better player with picks and other salaries or other young guys, whatever it's going to be. And John Collins is the guy I've always looked at who was like, could they make that work? Would Smart benefit Atlanta enough? Do you throw enough picks at them? Does the Hawks need enough of a shakeup where you could maybe flip that up? And each of the last 2 years, the Hawks were really toiling toward the deadline and then just go on this massive streak where they look awesome right into it. So I don't think that's in the cards. Obviously, there was a report that Herter and Reddish might have been a thing before Reddish went to New York. I wouldn't have done that. So those are the two things you're looking at. There's actually kind of 3 ideas with Smart. Flip him for more of a wing shooter scorer type that you need. That would obviously be harder. Trade him for a better point guard. I don't think that's in the cards. Everybody likes their point guards in the league. Or 3, really package him up into a better player, even if it's at a better position and leaves you weaker at point guard. I think that's tricky too. So you're sort of left asking, do you trade him for a Herter type and shake it up? I agree with your staleness point that there is kind of a staleness that you watch night in, night out with this mix. So if you want to solve that, you could do a Herter style deal. But I don't think the point guard or the better player than Smart are available when you're trading Smart. I don't know how you look at that.
So, Atlanta, it's like Bogdanovich and Collins are the names that have been coming up over and over and over again for the last couple of years. I think they're coming up again now.
I love John Collins, by the way.
Yeah, I thought that they were – so Collins and Lonzo Ball were the 2 guys that last year that was the most noise, that they were looking to use Smart and a bunch of assets to try to go after one of those guys.
And man, how does this team look with Ball right now? Oh,
the funny thing though is that like Lonzo, people talk about the Celtics like if only they could replace Smart with Ball, they would have the playmaker they need. I think Smart's playmaking is as good, if not better, than Lonzo Ball's. Honestly,
it's the shooting of Ball at this point.
It's shooting. That's what it is. It's just that Lonzo's pull-up game has gotten better. His spot-up game is better. Smart, it's the frustrating thing with Smart is just that there's so many nights where he's so great at that stuff, and it's just not consistent. And at the end of the day, it's just like the percentage is the percentage. With it, we've seen it, and we know what it is. And there's a lot of nights where Smart is one of the best point guards in the NBA, and he's just one of the best versatile point guards in the NBA. He doesn't play like a superstar that often, but he plays like a really high level starter a lot of the time. It's just too inconsistent. And you're right; it would make sense for them to try to get somebody like Collins. Get Horford out of the starting lineup, probably move him, or maybe even if they can keep Horford
It's just
in a
about
backup five
talent.
role, that'd be great. But yeah, it's
Collins
about
is a
talent.
much better player than Smart. That's all there is to it.
Probably. I don't know about much better. It's just different. Like Smart's a very good player, and I don't think Smart's value is that huge, especially with the extension kicking in. I've heard a lot about just trading him for a first round pick, which people say first round pick, and that can mean anything from the 10th
Yeah.
pick to the 30th pick. There's a huge difference between the 15th pick and a 28th pick. It's a massive difference. So I think maybe they'd be looking for a middle round pick. Doing a trade with Atlanta, if they could get Atlanta's first, which I can't remember if that's available, for Smart and some other good asset, that would be good. I don't really think that's kind of in the cards. I think Atlanta's mostly looking to consolidate their deep rotation to get a real high level player. We know that they've wanted Smart for a while. We know that they need Smart right now. I don't know if you can. I don't know what it would take to get Collins for Smart. You'd have to throw in probably multiple first round picks, something else. Langford and Neesmith are not. Those are not kickers in the trade enough to get it done. I'll have more on that later this week. But it's making a trade for John Collins right now is really difficult unless he really pushes Atlanta, which he can do, and he's been kind of subtly doing.
So how do you balance, let's say, the staleness, maybe the lack of connectivity in the room, or just a lack of a response to Smart's leadership, as you've written, with the fact that he does help them? Whether it's the defensive organization, the point of attack defense that he's just so great at, and the passing, those things help you on the floor. But I don't have a great sense of the room or anything like that, or how they're responding to him. But let's just say hypothetically that they just aren't into the Smart experience there in the room. At that point, I think it's kind of a no-brainer to just try to shake it up a little bit. But that's the hard things to balance. That one, yes, he's a solution to a lot of the things they need, but two, are they all for it? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Smart is it's funny whenever you talk about a trade for Smart, people will say, fans will respond, why would anybody want it? The Celtics want to give him up. Well, it's because the Celtics want to give him up because it hasn't been, I don't think it's he's working so much, it hasn't been working with him, or hasn't been working well enough. Like that's what it is. It hasn't been working well enough. So there's another team that thinks that they can make it work well. So there's another team that will value him. We know Utah's interested. We know that Atlanta's interested. Sacramento has been interested in the past. I mean, I don't know about Sacramento right now because they're such a weird spot. The Celtics, by the way, like every other team, I feel like should be trying to blow away Sacramento for a Tyrese Halliburton offer. I think he's got pretty clear all-star written all over him.
Yeah.
The idea that he's available is so insane to me. It's like
insane.
He's so obviously the guy that
when
should
I
build
saw
around.
him in Simmons conversations, I was like, give up Fox. We kind of know what Fox is now over Halliburton.
Yeah,
I love Halliburton's game.
You can't do Fox and Simmons together. I think Halliburton and Simmons together would be great. But so the point is to focus on the Celtics. Wait, what were we talking about again? It's overwhelming trying to figure out the Marcus Smart situation.
I'm kind of balancing. Let's just say like the most you could get for Smart realistically is like a Hurt or Reddish thing. Is that worth it? Because obviously Smart I think would be more valuable to the Celtics than Hurt or Reddish. The only thing that makes me think about it is if they aren't responding to him and if Smart's just not going to be a solution here for whatever reason. And then I think you just look at a shakeup deal.
I think it's that with this team, I think the thing I've heard over and over again over the last couple of years is that the guys that aren't getting it done on the floor are just not able to lead because the team's not going to listen to them because they're not getting it done on the floor. Or I shouldn't say not listen, but just like it doesn't. You can listen to them, but like in the NBA, you have to be so insanely intense and driven if you really want to win. And like with Kemba Walker last year, Walker is like one of the most well-liked people in the history of human society, but the dude just couldn't get to his stuff anymore. He wasn't hitting his shots. And so as much as he wanted to try to rally the team, like if he's going out there and he's breaking his shots, it's really hard for guys to kind of keep that energy up. And then there's the whole thing of like, well, then the other guys feel like they have to take the onus to try to control the situation. And then you kind of have the whole his turn, my turn kind of thing. So, at the end of the day, Jalen and Jason have done a really good job of expanding their games this year. Mm-hmm. Their assist numbers are kind of down because guys that they're giving it to aren't shooting the ball well. The offense isn't that good. And it certainly is there was because of the way that they run the fourth quarter offense. and then they're just like shooting horribly. They're even, they're shooting bad on open shots. I mean, if these guys are shooting just like near their average on open shots, they're scoring more. They're both looking like clear all stars. So it's like I don't think the team needs to. I don't think the team needs to worry about that pairing there. What I think what they need is they need to get back to having a third offensive guy that can really control the team and get it done on his own, the way that they had it in the past. And you don't have to have another all star necessarily, but you do at least need to have somebody that can be a scorer role and play make. And with it's like they have Schroeder and they have Smart, and they're two different types of players, and they both have their moments where they're doing it, they're getting it done, but neither of them are consistent enough for it to kind of
Well, they
fulfill that
want Brown.
third banana need.
It's interesting. They keep talking about Brown and Tatum in that role. Now, Tatum certainly has it, I think, at his best. And last night's win was another awesome moment for him. Miami, I thought he was just sensational passing the ball. But Brown, I don't know. Like the dribbling, the playmaking there, and even just the opportunities that he gets to do those things, they're not very consistent. He seems like more of a finisher than a initiator.
Yeah,
So if you are looking at it and you're the Celtics and you say these are going to be our playmakers, that sort of puts Smart in an off-ball role, and we know he's not great in that role. So that's another consideration there. That is he really helping you that much offensively if he's off the ball? And they need to believe in him too in those spots. The thing that like really makes me think about what you and others have written when it comes to the responsiveness to Smart is Brown and Tatum are kind of being called upon to make the decisions, right? Like Ime's not doing a ton of micromanaging from the sideline. He's not, calling timeout and saying put the ball in Smart's hands. Like he's trusting them to do these things to help them grow.
and he's not
Eh,
calling a ton of plays either.
Yeah.
He's letting them kind of run the offense a lot of the
So
time.
like it's on Brown and Tatum to put the ball in Smart's hands if they believe in him to make things happen for them. And in the fourth quarters, they're not. So that's where I look at it and say like, all right, this might just not work. Like we can all imagine a world where Smart's the center of all their playmaking, but if they're not going to make it happen, you look to move on. In my mind,
I think it's just that when they didn't persist with having him run point in crunch time, you saw the stuff that he said in the interview with Jay, and I think it's just like pretty clear that at this point they're not they're not they're not putting Smart in the position to succeed, and he's been doing it his whole career that way, where they weren't leaning into him being a point guard with the first unit, things of that nature,
Isaiah,
and
Kemba, Kyrie.
well, that was fine. I think. Well, that's the thing is, for a while, it was out of necessity for the roster design, and that was fine
Yeah.
because that's what you had to do. And Smart, I think, did.
And they do keep going back to that. Like that's where I haven't been a big Ime critic this year, but when people freak out about that, I'm like, all right, you got a point. Smart and Schroeder together is just, So that seems like the biggest story with this team heading into the deadline is the Schroeder situation. He's been great as a starter. He's been awful off the bench, and that was actually supposed to be his role here. It's like the sixth man, and he's shooting 34% off the bench this year. And again, last night, no show in 17 minutes. Now he's dealing with an Achilles, whatever. So maybe banged up a little bit, but overall this year, his success and failure has sort of been dictated by whether he's starting or sitting. Now, everybody loves to blame this guy. I mean, I have not seen a more I haven't seen a more hated Celtic in a Celtic uniform than I don't even know among the fan base. Like this might be the most hated Celtic in my. Oh yeah, we got two on the same team. Schroeder's a really good offensive, let's just say a scorer. He's a really good scorer, really good finisher. Yeah. So, and that's helped them because they've needed scoring, especially when guys have been out. So I think the signing worked. Now, just to read Mark Stein, who reported that they just want to dump him essentially into the Dallas TP or whoever else has a TP out there, I'd imagine. That's frustrating for me because you did waste half a year here not playing Pritchard at all, propping up Schroeder's role, using awkward lineups with Schroeder, and now to just essentially move on for what would be nothing, tax relief, whatever you want to call it. That to me is kind of the spinning of the wheels that we've seen with Baines getting dumped after he got signed, and Cantu getting dumped after he got signed, and Kemba, and just all these different moves, Tristan, that they've made and then reversed. And that was really all there was to it. You made a move, and then the only move you made after was just reversing that trade. And that's kind of how they've been spinning their wheels organizationally here. So what's your read on the Schroeder situation during the deadline? That's crazy. So this is weird. I'm seeing the commenters. They think I'm ignoring them. For some reason, I guess they can hear me. They can't hear Jared live as we record this, but I can hear Jared loud and clear. So I'm hoping this records. I think it should for the official podcast version of the replay later that we'll re-upload. I don't know what's going on or why they can't hear Jared. I guess they can hear me. So I guess the live viewers are kind of screwed here, but we'll roll on. We'll wrap it up shortly. That's the Schröder deal. I don't even know where I was going to go from there, but yeah, people not hearing Jared in the chat. Sorry, everybody. I don't know how to fix that live here, but we should be good on the recorded side. So that's Schröder. We talked a ton of Smart. Is there anything else happening around the league or on this? Oh yeah, let's hit Horford. So you did write that Horford is potentially available. That's obviously a massive salary. It's something of a salary relief for any team that would get him if they want to go in that direction this offseason. But there's a partial guarantee, so I think that kind of limits that. But I don't know. Like this deadline in particular, do you think there's a real chance Horford can move? Because he is helping them on the defensive end right now. And that salary is just so big. I don't know how you match that unless you're trading for something like a Harrison Barnes or whoever who has a pretty big salary that would actually come back and help you. Like, what would a Horford trade look like next week? All right, we still don't have you, Jared, in the chat. I hope all that got recorded. Want to jump out and jump back in, and we'll try to wrap
I'm
it
jumping
up here.
in.
And if people,
yeah, Jared, can you hear me?
Look at
buddy,
this.
I'm jumping in just to keep Bobby going. Can you jump out and back in? And if they can come in and hear you, I will leave. I promise. Nobody has to endure a John Zanis podcast. They came for a Jared Weiss one.
Jared's out, John's in.
Jared, jump out and then right back in. And assuming everybody can hear you, then we'll just resume. But I didn't want Bobby to flounder. So Bobby, I just came in here to say, hi.
This is great. The commenters are gonna love this. A John appearance on Don't Care.
Let me bring in Jared and see if he's okay. Like I said, I didn't want you to filibuster for too long. Jared, you there, buddy?
Yeah. Does anyone hear me?
So let's see what the chat says. Chat, jump in and tell us if you can hear Jared.
This is great.
All right, we got a boo.
Is he
They're
back?
just mad. They're mad that I'm here, Jared.
Yeah,
they
didn't want to see Zanis.
Some are okay. It sounds like
they
got
you.
They
got him.
I can't believe this. I'm sorry, everybody.
Bye, guys.
See, John.
It's not you. The thing glitches sometimes, and for some reason it doesn't work that way. So I'm gonna take off. But yeah, resume.
Okay, good. AL can hear Bearded Man now. I'm going to repeat everything I just said for the last half hour. Why don't we do another like 15 minutes just so we can kind of go through some of that stuff?
Yeah, we'll see what the recording does too, but we can mess around with the power of editing. I just didn't want it to get messed up during the live.
The chat was furious. They were.
It would be really funny if Bobby this whole time couldn't hear me and was just reading my lips and responding to that the whole time.
Yeah. Or just saying whatever. Anyway, have a good rest of your conversation. Later, guys.
Good to see you.
All right. So just for the chat, let's hear Cliff Notes version. 3 minutes or less. Schröder and Schröder and Horford. What people can expect heading into the deadline for their two availabilities. And yes, if you go back and watch the replay, I'm almost certain that the full version is going to be there. But just for these people that are hanging out right now, 2 minutes or less. Schröder, Horford. Who's moving? Who's staying?
Okay, first on, I see Toscano's in the chat, so I want to get Toscano in here for sure. I haven't talked to him in too long. What up, buddy? Okay, Schröder. I think the issue here was that if they you brought up the sign report about them just hoping they can get him into a TP like with Dallas. I don't think they're looking to just dump him for nothing. It doesn't make sense to dump him just to pick up a TP.
So they could potentially keep him.
TPs. They could if you're not going to get any draft comp, then I don't think getting the $5.6 million TP or whatever is really worth it to drop him. Unless like they were gonna play Pritchard and he loses his shit, but at that point just send him home. Like whatever, just send him home at that point. Or you do it just so that you can sign some 10-day guy and start experimenting with 10-day guys or something like that. I don't know, but I think they can keep him and just shave down his minutes and give Pritchard more minutes. But I agree with everybody that it makes sense for you to get him out of there. Just not that he deserves to get dumped by the team, but just that you got to start developing Pritchard and giving Pritchard more of a role, or you got to trade Pritchard.
All right,
like he's already old. Horford, I wouldn't be surprised if they moved him for somebody that has a fully guaranteed deal next season instead of his kind of half guaranteed deal. If that player is a more useful rotation player that could have more trade value for building a trade package this offseason, where a team could be taking that player on and thinking this could be a good part of our rotation, and we're happy to use him as a salary building block for a larger trade. I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to trade Horford just to get rid of Horford now when you can just do it in the offseason at that point.
Mm-hmm. Now, who are some names potentially coming into Boston that you would keep an eye on here? Now, you always hear the Barnes. They've been connected to Grant in the past. That's probably an expensive one. I guess the question is this group going to be more looking to buy, or I don't know if you can call it a sell, but shaving down Schröder, shaving down Horford, and potentially even Richardson? I think that would be something of a selective sell for this group. What do you think is more likely, or could you see a mix of those two things?
Yeah, you could see a mix of those two things. I think that would be very confusing, but actually makes some sense. That I really do think all the moves at this point are really just trying to improve their positioning to make trades in the offseason. And this team, the thing with this team is in the standings, they're close enough that like they're not completely out of it. They're close enough that they put things together over the last 30 games, and suddenly they got a shot at making a bit of a run here in the East. I don't see enough at this point to be confident in that, but I would not be surprised if they make an incremental step forward, bringing in somebody that's a good perimeter on-ball scorer or playmaker, or both ideally, to get a little bit better this year, as long as you still maintain viability on the trade market this offseason. So, they have, like, Josh Richardson is an interesting guy where he's been kind of good at everything for them, but he's not quite great at one specific thing. And even though he is shooting well from the field or from deep, he's not taking that many shots. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they try to move him for a more high volume scorer from deep, or a more on-ball point guard type. I think that their thought is that their defense is good enough, it's been good enough this year that they can kind of sacrifice a good, well-rounded player like him to try to get more of a specialist that they can at least trust to be a smarter playmaker or smarter scorer, or at least a deeper scorer than like Dennis Schröder, who has filled a lot of that offensive role for them. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them make that move. Wouldn't be surprised to see them kind of strip this down and try to get better draft picks. I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these recent first-round picks like Langford and Neesmith or maybe Pritchard get tagged into trades to try to do that. I don't get a sense that there's a ton of faith in the young core beyond the Williams guys to really grow here. And there's going to be the team has first round picks to utilize to get new guys in. None of those guys. I guess Pritchard's been solid for his draft position at least as of last year. But like Langford and Neesmith haven't really shown you much so far to think that their trajectory is still as a lottery pick. Yeah, it's been really rough for them. And to be fair to them, they got brought into situations where they had to kind of reshape their game a little bit, and that's a really tough adjustment. It takes several years to do that, but we just haven't like with Rob Williams. At least I saw very clear growth year to year, and even though he still kind of sucked for a few years, I could see the way his game was reshaping very clearly, and we haven't really seen any of that for Neesmith and Langford.
Grant's done a good job reshaping his game for sure as a shooter.
Williams is doing really well. His growth curve is looking really good right now. Rob obviously is looking really good right now. Rob, I think especially the last month and a half, has really kind of fixed a lot of the issues that we were seeing earlier in the year. He's honestly at this point, I wrote about this like a month ago. I think they need to start running through the high post with him a little bit more and use him as a playmaker better. Use him
Brown talked about it too.
Yeah, like I think all these guys see that, and I wouldn't be surprised if when they change up the roster, hopefully change up the roster after the trade deadline, that they start utilizing him in different ways.
Because I think Rob there'll be some changes here. Yeah, I mean, even with the recent success, you can still parlay that into better offense, more of an offensive fit, somebody in that role. The picks, I do think you have to start looking at moving at some point, just because I think they're their only way to improve realistically. You don't have the younger players on the roster to give up. Probably have to replace that with some picks. Now, the one other thing I saw in your report, and we will get you out of here in just a minute, Jared, their interest in a center. I found that interesting. I do find that fitting, actually, though, because there's such a low rim rate team in terms of getting shots off per game at the basket, and they don't really have a center who they can throw the ball into and just get a post touch there. Rob's a great pick and roll guy above the rim, but it's not a play that you do more than 5-6 times a game. And oftentimes he's almost passing out of that position too. So is that like a Montrezl Harrell type? Is that like someone expensive as Miles Turner? I wouldn't think it'd be with Rob's future here, but what's kind of your read on their interest in a center?
Yeah, I mean, I could see Nurkic being like a pretty clear target. I just think Nurkic probably is going to have too much of a market from other teams, but I mean, there's a lot of work to be done with Portland. So I think Portland is a team that's really open for business. They are in a different spot than the Celtics because their timeline, I think, is ticking a little bit louder. Dame is injured for a while. CJ has been, CJ, I feel like it's in the same situation as Smart, where it hasn't been working for long enough that even though he's clearly a good player, like at a certain point,
that's a guy you can throw the ball to inside and he's going to score a ton of points. He had 27 against Boston that night?
He was, yeah. And he alternates between being a great defender and a mediocre defender. Like I remember the Celtics played him earlier in the year and they destroyed him and it was like embarrassing. And then I watched him play like a week later and he completely destroyed another team with his defense. I mean, the guy's very much all over the place. But he's an all-star center on his best nights, as like we saw in that last Celtics game.
And he's huge. So he is a massive human being.
Yeah, and you can if they just like traded the guys like someone like Langford and Neesmith and something else to kind of build that trade around, like Richardson, just for someone like Nurkic. And it's just like gone and off the books after the season. And they basically just like cash in a good veteran talent and a young piece that you would still hope that could turn into something just to get Nurkic in there and try to make the team a little bit better this year. I wouldn't be surprised if they did something like that.
He would be a lot of fun. Now, the tax is obviously an implication there. Nurkic is a TP guy, right? He could fit the TP. I think he's 13, right? He's definitely under 17. So you could take him on without giving up salary back, but there's this tax implication. And
they're not going to stay over the tax. No.
Every move that they've made over the last month or so here, whether it's cutting Parker, trading Wancho, and now maybe just getting off Schroeder's contract, looks tax dedicated. Now, we haven't heard a ton from Wick this year. Usually he calls the radio station. He hasn't done that yet. I did see him in Washington. I wasn't able to chat with him, but he was there for that game. So I don't know. It's interesting. We don't really know where they're at in terms of the tax. It does feel like, though, that there is something of a mandate to be under that this year, just based off the moves they've made so far. It's always complicated. I'm sure they would spend for a winner. But in recent years, they haven't really jumped over that line. In fact, they've made various different moves to stay under that line. So I know that's not different from other teams, but it does seem to be a restriction that when you have Tatum on a max, Brown on a max, and Horford pretty close, you're going to be tight against that line for the foreseeable future, not to mention Rob's extension and Smart's extension. So, like, they're kind of tight there. Is that something that just changes immediately in the offseason? They're kicking it back there? Or are there real financial limitations on this team, you think?
I think it's just pretty simply that if you're not contending in the NBA, then there's no reason to be over the tax because of the way the repeater tax is set up. And also that how the progressive tax works. Like if you get 20 million over the tax, you're like the bill jumps up like crazy. And so I think it's also about that you want to start clearing the deck so that when you add on another salary, it's not that you're just starting to clock on the repeater tax. It's that you're not pushing too far into the progressive tax and you have more room there. So, I mean, we know this team wants to get another max player. It's like the Celtics ownership has no problem paying for a team that's like a clear contender. I think that their pockets have got a little bit better, as most teams have. Unless Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos bought an NBA team, I think a lot of these guys are generally got a little bit tighter. And I mean, who knows? Maybe he bought a bunch of Ethereum 2 years ago, and now he's actually fine. Who knows? But or maybe he's got a bunch of Bored Ape Yacht Clubs things sitting around, and that stuff's appreciating.
Would you sell the team to LeBron if he was going to spend deep into the tax? There's a what if for Celtics fans.
I mean, we've seen what's happened in Charlotte. Charlotte's been, they've been treading the treadmill of mediocrity for a while now, but they did sign Hayward. They did pay Hayward. And the big question with them is, are they not pushing deeper into the tax so they haven't had the opportunity to, or are they just going to be a team that kind of sits on the borderline of that?
I find the 10 million thing
rich, but not crazy rich.
I find the 10 million thing interesting too. That Hollinger threw out there, I think first, probably him or Bobby Marks, that they do get 10 million bucks if they stay under the tax, which is interesting to me. Is that just something that Wick puts in his pocket and it's profit, or does that get reinvested? Like, I don't really know what the benefit is of that 10 million. Sure, it's nice to have, but I don't know where it goes. So that's another question.
I think it goes into paying the tax the next year. It's
all right.
I mean, I don't know the particulars of Causeway Ventures or whatever it's called. I can't remember off the top of my head. But no, I think it's that tax so that you're not paying $50 million in tax in 2 years. I mean, that's why you're doing it. It's a nice little bonus that you get the payout then from the revenue sharing or the tax sharing, but that goes back into the team's treasury, and then they spend that money next year when they're going into the tax. But I really think it's that they want to just get deeper out of the repeater tax cycle, out of the 3 times in 4 years cycle, and then that just gives them more runway to go triple max player and have 3 stars, try to recruit that third guy to go around Brown and Tatum. Because, I mean, I think we're seeing pretty clearly that, I trust me, I'm one of those people that has talked to a lot of people and talked a lot about publicly about the way the league views the whole Brown and Tatum thing. It's really every other person you talk to has differing opinion. As somebody who watches them all the time and has watched their whole career blossom, I'm feeling pretty fine with it. I think Tatum has grown pretty significantly as a playmaker, and Brown has made enough progress that I'm comfortable with him.
Brown has just become a flame-throwing scorer. It's unreal.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Is so like, you compare them to Kawhi and PG because that's the other kind of clear wing pairing out there. Durant and Harden doesn't work as hard, and Durant's like top 5 wing of all time, right? So, and Durant's one of the best playmaking wings I think we've ever seen too. So it's like Kawhi and PG are the comp. We haven't seen enough Kawhi and PG to know how it works, but Kawhi's a better player between the two of those. I don't know who's the better playmaker between the two of those, and it's credit to how good of a playmaker.
I'd lean George. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, but they're both really good playmakers. Not quite like elite playmakers. They're not quite Durant. Obviously, not LeBron. maybe not quite Giannis, but they're both really, really good playmakers and obviously elite 3-level scorers. And
I was
so
talking to Caitlin Cooper about that a couple of weeks ago. It took them a while to get there. It did.
exactly. Took Paul George a long time, I think, to become a competent 3-level playmaker. And Kawhi, I don't know if Kawhi was that good of a playmaker until Toronto, right?
Even in Toronto, I remember the biggest question with that team that year was, is Kawhi a good enough playmaker for them? And then he
That's true.
ultimately was.
Yeah, I mean, Kawhi in his
And
first
you had
year
Lowry helping you out, yeah.
Yeah. But Kawhi in his first year with the Clippers was unbelievable as a playmaker. Like, it was, I think it kind of got under.
I love the little he palms the ball and he's just kind of shaking it around and then he fires it somewhere. Man, I miss Kawhi.
But the way that like Kawhi can get to the baseline and make the Spurs hammer pass to the corner, the way he can just like palm the ball and just like whip it out to the weak side shooter on the elbow from the baseline, that's stuff that Tatum is starting to do. And you know, I had a big piece last year about how Tatum was kind of turning into Kawhi offensively. And actually, you could say on both sides. So Kawhi's physicality on defense is at another level. His instincts are at another
Tatum
level.
Can
but
be such a good defender.
Yeah, I mean, Tatum at times is pretty phenomenal defensively, but he's mostly a kind of off. Tatum's probably more of like a less good Giannis as a defender. He's more of an off-ball help.
Shorter,
guy.
yeah. If he was 7 feet, he'd be Giannis, yeah.
Yeah, Giannis has a different level of intensity and physicality and competitiveness that Tatum doesn't quite have. With all due respect to Tatum and us respecting his, quiet competitor thing, there's still you still see the way that the intensity manifests in guys like Giannis.
Yeah.
Even Kawhi, Kawhi's at a different level, even though he's that same kind of quiet, fierce side. But Tatum's made progress. I mean, everything about Tatum to me says he's still on track to be an elite MVP caliber player, as I've been saying for years now, except that his shot has just been crap this year. But
Giannis, by the way, would be Syracuse player. Did you see that? Did you see that weird story this week?
No.
He went to Syracuse for some reason, and who knows how they got him up there for a game. And Syracuse.com did get the quote, "If I could have went to college, I would have gone here." So they have that.
Would have been to see him in a zone defense. I mean, I don't watch them anymore, so I don't know. But that would have been disappointing. But
he would have been awesome. 2013 Giannis in college would have been dominant, but I don't think it would have been at Syracuse.
For me at this point with Tatum, I think my only questions about his ceiling are just mindset and it's with mindset. It's not about it's not like a doesn't care thing. This boy cares, we know that, or this guy cares. I don't want to say boy, but this guy cares. I've written plenty of stories about his background as a competitor, stuff like that. The guy cares about how does he view how he can maximize winning, and can he love physicality to a degree, and can he embrace failure to a degree? I think that he's someone that is slowly starting to be willing to take risks and fail. And we are seeing that he's being more willing to give up the ball with the risk of failure. He's defaulting less to taking his turnaround ISO jumpers and stuff like that in crunch time. I think we're seeing growth in that. I think the question with him is, can the team grow with him? And I think that's,
do they have enough time?
Jalen.
That's the biggest question. How long are these guys sticking around? Because if they stay around for extra contracts beyond this one, great. You got all the time in the world and you can slow grow and let them ease into these roles because they're young enough. But the youth is counteracted by Brown being 2 years away once this season ends, and Tatum being 3, I believe, after this year ends. So the clock does start ticking in terms of putting a winner around them. So that's why you do want to see them start to proactively improve and not just dive under the tax and, punt on this deadline and, shave off some pieces and go young. I'm fine if they go young. I don't think they're going to do it. It just doesn't seem like they are that invested in the Romeo Neesmith stuff. In fact, they might even move off those players at the deadline. That would probably be less surprising to me than them propping them up the roster. So on the other end,
that has been explored. I know that.
What's that? Propping them up?
Moving
them.
All right, that's
more on that to come.
And not for the sake of just dumping them because they're not working out, but just they are available trade pieces. And I think I reported this last week or 2 weeks ago. Their price is not that high right now.
Yeah,
and they're still showing up in a lot of the trade stuff that I'm hearing, which tells you that if they're not looking to guys through their low value period, then that means that they're ready to try something else. And I get it. I get that. And sometimes in the NBA, you got a guy who's talented. He's not in the right situation, and you just have to give up on that. And he flourishes somewhere else, and it makes you look like you're a failure. But sometimes it's like, you guys, it will not work in your situation. Yeah. And it's not like, we know Romeo Langford is a good player. We know Aaron Nesmith is a good player. I mean, the funny thing with Langford is Langford hasn't really lived up to his potential for a while now. Like going back to high school, I still don't think he was living up to his potential. I think his potential is still a lot higher. But the things that he did well at the lower level, he doesn't really ever get to do any of that stuff. Like, I think one of the reasons we talk so much about trading Schröder to make room for Peyton Pritchard. How about trading Schröder and or Josh Richardson to make room for Romeo Langford to run point? Like, Romeo Langford was a point guard, basically.
I'm all for it. What this team is missing right now is a direction. If they want to go young and slow build, start that now. You're probably overdue to do that. If you want to ramp up and go in a more veteran, reliable contributor direction and buy some guys, I think that's smart too. But you can't just keep towing the line here, or you're going to run out of time with Brown and Tatum.
They have to buy better. So last year, we got to get back to the Jalen point. So last year they started over, played the young guys, and they sucked. They didn't suck. They were mediocre. They were slightly below average.
They were much worse last year than they were this year. I think people forget that.
I guess. I mean,
not record, just how I felt and how they looked and how awful they were defensively and just much less solid. At least this team kind of has like a solid identity, I guess you would say, on the defensive end.
Yeah, they were not as talented. But they also didn't fail as spectacularly as this team does.
No.
And they have the COVID thing. And I mean, we've talked about the Celtics for like 6 years in a row now. If only they would get healthy. They're just never going to be healthy.
No,
and
no
there's very few teams that are.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the Nets. The Nets maybe will get a chance to be fully healthy this year, but like the Nets should have won the championship pretty easily last year, and they didn't because of injury. And I wouldn't be, it's like, it's possible it's going to happen with them this year. It's possible this could happen with a few different teams where they don't get to, that someone's going to get hurt and they can't fill their potential. A lot of other teams have risen and fallen because of that. Celtics are one of them. But just to get back to the timeline thing, I'm not worried about Tatum. Like, Tatum is pretty clearly entrenched as the franchise here, the franchise. And we know this because Tatum is top 6 basically in jersey sales. All-star voting is really high. And he's become a lot more marketable. He's become more personable and stuff like that. He's become more himself in the public eye. But the dude isn't nearly as smart as some of these other guys. He doesn't even have his own signature shoe like some of the other younger guys do. He's got the shots that he's hit in the big moments. He boomed LeBron. He has the playoff stuff. Like, he's in Boston. He's in a huge market. He's in a market it's not only big for sports locally. The Celtics have more fans around the world outside of this country than almost any other team. Like, it's a huge global fan base, and that's a huge thing for him. Is that he's got people in Asia and Africa and Europe and South America buying his jerseys. Actually, I should have said Australia. Australia's
people in Spain. They love him.
People in Spain are huge. Philippines, like, Celtics are huge. Like, he's a huge star over there, and I think his agents, like, he is an agent who's done really good with marketing. Like, it was him and Kyrie were the main clients for a while. And both of those guys have like phenomenal off-court marketing. Like, Kyrie is one of the big shoe kings of the sport.
Oh yeah.
Tatum was getting so many endorsement deals where like
ads, he's everywhere.
His press conferences
Gatorade.
were like, yeah. And like the dude was getting Gatorade ads because he didn't have to talk in the Gatorade ads. He had the awkward Metro PCS ads. Like, now he's actually getting good. The Subway ads were phenomenal. Like, Draymond, like he's making strides, and I'm interested to see, now that he's gotten so much more comfortable in press conferences like this year. I'm really just interested to see him getting more commercials where I think he might be better on camera. But the point is that he is in a place where he is very marketable. His off court is going to be really strong, and he has really strong control within the franchise. Like, the former one of the former athletic trainers here, Nick Sang, who's a great dude. Everybody likes him. He left for the Patriots, and they brought him back just to be Tatum's guy. Like, he's just Tatum's guy. Tatum is his own guy. Tatum gets the bicycle. He's on the bike. He doesn't sit on the bench. And like, yeah, I've played that down as some sort of, separation thing. And I mean, there's a reason why not every single NBA player in the league gets to go sit on the bike instead of the bench. Like, you gotta really.
We have talked about that for hours on the Garden Report. Bike watch is a thing.
Credit to him, man, because that dude very rarely gets injured, and he plays. Is he leading the league in minutes still? Or he's like pretty high
I think
up there.
Westbrook does, yeah, but he's top 10, I believe.
Yeah. So like, I mean, he's an Iron Man for sure, and the dude takes care of himself and works harder than almost anybody in the league. And credit to him that process works, and credit to the Celtics for letting him do it. And so the point is that dude is very well entrenched as a franchise superstar.
I agree. Jalen's the one.
I don't see much impetus to leave. It's Jalen
because he's closer to free agency. He's not the franchise. I think he's a guy who's very confident in his abilities to lead a team into the future and blah, 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 blah.
And I think there's things that he wants that he's probably not going to get in the city of Boston so much. And I think that there is something in him that sees that being a franchise player in another city might be more appealing to him. If he's gonna be somewhat marginalized in the city. And like the dude I think has done enough at this point to deserve to be treated as a franchise face, and I think he generally is. But I think from his perspective, he's probably just thinking like, I'm doing everything that I need to be doing to get that treatment. And Tatum at the end of the day is still the one talked about. And that's because frankly, like Tatum's the dude that he was the dude scoring 50 points in the playoffs more consistently. And like credit to Jalen, like you knew Jalen wanted to set that agenda this year when he came out and he scored 46 on opening night. Like he wanted to make that point. Now they're both scoring. They both are getting 50-point nights. They're starting to score 30 points in the same game as each other. Like they're doing the stuff they need to do to make that thing work. I think it's that like it works with the Clippers. Well, we don't know if it works with the Clippers, but I think it could work with the Clippers because both PG and Kawhi have already gotten their chance to be the franchise guy. They've already done all that stuff. Obviously, Kawhi has already achieved pretty much everything you can in the league. I think Kawhi wanted to just run his own franchise, and that's what he got with the Clippers. Like Kawhi,
it's tricky.
Kawhi has more power in that org than almost any player in the NBA has with their team. Maybe like LeBron's the only one that has more. PG, I think he's pretty satisfied with what he's got there. It certainly seems. And
this is the Brown conversation. It's not can they work together, can they play together? It's does he stay here beyond the 2 years? And at some point you get close enough to that maybe you don't get maximum value for him because of his closeness to free agency. And I love him. I think he's my favorite Celtic at this point. I think his potential is enormous. But if they're not going to be championship contenders together right now, and that allure of leaving and having your own franchise brightens within the next year and a half here, and maybe they end up losing him for nothing at that point. That's where it gets scary because then there's so little around Tatum at that point that you're a year from Tatum and he's like, all right, is this a situation for me? That sort of plays into the eventual Tatum. I agree with you. I'm not worried about Tatum at all right now, but if you just end up letting Brown walk out the door for nothing in 2 years, different situation. Now, you got to get a ton for him, right? If you're going to do that deal. I don't know if you get a ton for Brown if you end up shopping him eventually. I think it's probably less than people would imagine. But I'm not there yet. I don't think they're close to that point yet. So that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, like what would be really interesting is what if Sacramento offers like Halliburton, most of their rotation, with Halliburton in there. What if they even included Fox?
The one that appeals to me most? Memphis.
Like Triple J?
Yeah. If they throw him in with Bane or Clark or something like that, you get kind of their underbelly of depth. I don't think they would throw Jackson in though, so I'm probably a no on everything else.
I've heard that's a non-starter for them, and
he's going to get really good really fast.
Yeah, a lot of people have thrown out Bane and Anderson and who am I forgetting? There's
Dylan Brooks.
Oh, Brooks, thank you, Brooks. Some other stuff. It's an interesting proposal, and Bane's another one of these guys where he's old enough that is he the same age as Jalen?
He was an older guy coming out for sure.
Yeah, Desmond Bane is 23 and Jalen's 24, right? So it's like
that is crazy. That differentiate Chris Duarte coming in at what's he 24, the rookie?
Yeah,
it's crazy the range.
I forgot Jalen turned 25 at the beginning of the year. So 2 year age difference. It's like I would not expect Bane to get that close to Jalen's level. I think there's still like a pretty clear gap between those guys. As much as I really like Bane, but that's a downgrade that's a downgrade with not nearly
And that's what
enough
happens
upside.
when you trade a star. You downgrade. You get a bunch of stuff, and it usually doesn't work out, and you almost always lose that trade. There's
Yeah,
one
I
for
mean-
ones you could dream of, like Lillard. I don't know if that's a thing anymore. He's too old, too expensive. Beal. I'm past the whole Beal thing at this point, especially the way he's
I would
played this
rather have
year.
Jaylen Brown than Bradley Beal.
Yeah,
Like, I
today.
felt that way for a couple of years, and I think it's even more so this season.
So what are you getting if you trade Brown at this point? That's what everybody's gonna really think about when
Yeah,
they
I think
throw
you're
that
hoping for
proposal out there.
I think you're hoping for a D package, so not quite a Drew package. The Drew Holiday package was the picks and then the players they didn't really need. It was you're looking for something closer to the AD package where it's a couple good young starters and a few picks. You're not going to get 5 picks, maybe like 2 picks and 1 potential all-star and 1 good young player. And like Sacramento was a team that could do that. There's a few other teams out there like that. But that's if you can get Halliburton, then I don't know. It's Halliburton's one of those guys where a lot of people I talk to think like he's clearly going to be an all-star. A lot of other people think that he's going to be like a kind of like where Drew Holiday was early in his career, where he's like not quite at that all-star level. But
what's the most
close
frustrating
enough.
part about all that? You miss Hero by 1. You miss Halliburton by I think it was 1 or 2 picks. You draft
3.
Bane. You draft Bane and trade him. So all those guys were there for you potentially if you got aggressive enough. Even Thibault, who's a guy that they picked and traded in that spot. These are all guys that could have helped them. So
I mean,
I know it's tough. It's tough. It's what ifs for everybody, but
I think I don't have any issues with the Thibault trade. I think they need a player like Grant more than they need a player like Thibault and I think those guys are pretty comparable at this point.
Really?
Thibault
I love Thibault.
I love him. Like he's an elite on-ball defender. He's a really good help defender, and he is like an okay offensive player. Well, I think Grant already is like a pretty good help defender. I would say he's starting to become a good point of attack defender in a few different roles. He's a really good shooter, and he's starting to make some progress as a passer, attacking closeouts. So
he blocked Hero last night on the drive. That was impressive. On a nice switch.
Yeah, I mean,
he's been good this year.
We've
kept you too long. I do want to throw one more thing out there if you want to answer it quickly. Heading into the deadline here in just 9 days, what do you think is going to happen around the league? If you had to predict what's going to be like the move of the deadline, or maybe even 1, 2, or 3 moves. I think it's going to be a pretty active deadline if I had to guess, just with everything that's outstanding and how many teams are potentially contending and just all these wacky situations like Ben Simmons. What's going to be the story of deadline day if you had to predict?
I've always felt that Simmons would get moved now because there's enough good packages potentially available, but they've been making so much noise about holding out for Harden that I think they actually believe they can hold out for Harden. And so I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Morey is the ultimate realist. So, I just wouldn't be surprised if he thinks that Harden is not realistic and makes a move now. I don't know why the Harden deal didn't happen. I guess it was really just because Fertitta refused to do it. I don't know. But, I mean, that would be the dream trade. Right, like we all dream of seeing Joel Embiid play.
That's like a new era
right there.
That's a new era Kobe Shaq in some way.
Yeah, especially with Harden getting older and the health being an issue, it'd be really fascinating to just see that gamble of like, can Harden stay healthy long enough for them to become a dynasty, because that team has real dynastic potential, or at least like they can compete with Milwaukee, and it seems like Phoenix is going to be.
Embiid's got to get that ring. If he doesn't win a ring in his career.
Yeah, I mean Embiid. He was the dude that back when he was coming to the league, I said this dude's the next Hakeem Olajuwon, and I've always believed he's an MVP, and it's playing out, and they're wasting his prime right now. God forbid. I mean, look at how solid that team is, and look at how good he's been this year with what he has around him. Or like he doesn't have another high level playmaker, offensive player around him.
He is carrying that team.
It's incredible what he's doing. Yeah, like we saw what happened when Giannis continued to grow and they put a good team around him. Like the team is amazing, and they're a champion now. And Giannis is turning into one of the 10 best players ever, probably at this rate. Or I hate using the number because it's like the top 10 players when we were kids. You need to make that top 13 now because there's been more time. But like Giannis is one of the he's making a good case for being like tier 2 NBA player of all time and getting to that Durant level. maybe it keeps going at this rate. He becomes a tier 1 all-time player. Who knows? But
and this is what you're competing with in the East if you're the Celtics for years to come.
Exactly. And that's why it's like, why? Like, we know Tatum and Brown are the template for their game is getting really good. They're just not ready. They're not ready to execute it at the level that they need to right now. Like when they had Kyrie there, when they had the talent, and they had Hayward too. They had the talent to cover up for their youth, I guess, of those two guys. The bubble, they started to get to that level where they could carry. I think there's just a lot of scenario in the bubble that allowed them to get better. And the credit to them that they did it with Kemba being, half of himself and Hayward being hurt most. That was an amazing run. But the last 2 years, I think, is the reality of it. When you have really, 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 good young stars who just aren't quite complete players yet, with a team that is not properly calibrated around them, that's a team that is going to be just barely above 500. And it's not, if you can recalibrate the whole rotation around them, you can make a big jump real quick. Like we have seen that happen a few different times. I think Brown and Tatum are good enough already that you can do that. But it's hard to imagine that they can make that kind of recalibration that quickly right now at the deadline in a year when there's so many teams in the play-in contention or playoff contention. There's only Sacramento, I feel like, are the only two teams that are obvious teams ready to make moves right now. Those are the only two I can think of. I might be even forgetting one. Dallas seems like one too, but not quite at that same level.
Yeah, among the buyers, right? Sellers, Indiana, Portland, those are teams that are definitely going to be active. On the bottom end of things.
Sacks a seller at that point. Yeah. I mean, Atlanta, it's like, I don't know what to call Atlanta, because Atlanta, they are selling talent, most likely.
It's consolidation, right? It's in the middle.
Yeah. So you can do business with Atlanta and make your team better as well.
Yeah. So Simmons, yes or no? Does he move?
I'll still say yes, because what does it matter? It's a prediction. Predictions are meaningless. It's probably going to be wrong. So who cares?
All right. Anything else that could potentially happen? I won't ask you to predict.
I would be shocked if Atlanta doesn't make a trade, just because they've been ripe for a consolidation for a while now. I think all of their trade pieces have done enough this season to tell me that they're worth trading for. So, it's John Collins gets moved. That'd be really fascinating, and I'd kind of expect it to a degree, because when he signed that deal,
now.
It certainly seemed like he was signing that deal with the expectation that they were either going to really build the offense into him or they were going to trade him. And I mean, just at the end of the day, his chemistry with Trey has just not been good. There's been a lot of stuff said. I hear a lot of rumblings that I can't report on because they're just rumblings that I hear. But there's not a lot of positive noise there.
Yeah, Sacramento, Utah with an injury now. I think there's a lot of teams that could be pretty active. It's gonna be a fun day. We're just over a week away now. Thanks for sticking around, Jared. We went way over our total. Go ahead.
Pour one out for Joe Ingles. I feel so bad for that dude.
And Aaron Baines, that whole Australia crew, they made it to the pinnacle, bronze medal, almost got the gold, and they all just kind of fell apart immediately after. Mills is still playing well, but yeah, they were an old.
He was taking a step back this year, but he was the dude that I kind of thought the Celtics were going to trade for. He was pretty high on the list of guys I thought they would trade for. As was Ricky Rubio. All the guys that the Celtics could get that would be a great fit for them as a good balanced playmaker. They're all going down right now, so I don't know where the move.
Yeah, I wrote a fake trade that actually got the Celtics Rubio for the deadline. It's not going to happen, but the money does work out if you flip Schröder and Richardson for Rubio and maybe get a pick back or something like that. Sell move.
Yeah, that would have made sense.
Jared, thank you. Appreciate the time, the technical difficulty workaround. We'll talk music another day, as well as Tom Brady. Do it on your own time, I guess. So we got Patriots coverage here at CLNS to do that. Subscribe to Dome Theory, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere you get your podcasts, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, whatever they call it now. Jared, anything you want to plug that's coming up the line at Athletic or anywhere else that you got coming?
Yeah, I love this last comment, Bobby over Tom Brady. Facts. Because Bobby at least will show love to the Boston fans when he quits CLNS one day.
What a wacky week for Brady.
Oh, man. I got stay tuned for Brady stuff. I'll say that.
All right. There it is. Let him hold it. Jared, thanks so much. Keep up the great work. We all enjoy reading your coverage at The Athletic there. And miss you, Celtics blog side and CLNS. So keep up the good work, and we'll see you on the road.
I miss you guys. Great. It's always great to be back on CLNS. If people that don't know, I was one of the co-founders way back in the day with Chelsea and Brandon Paul and Sean Backey and all those guys. So I always love coming back whenever I get to. So hopefully you guys will bring me back soon. And thank you to all the commenters that put up the live people putting up with watching my mouth move
The
no
lip
audio for 30 minutes. Hopefully everybody goes back and listens to the pod and has everything there.
Yep. That section will be back in there, I'm sure. I could hear it myself. So we'll see you in a couple days, everybody. And thanks, Jared.